This week, something completely different, as they used to say on Python. Hello, Robyn Williams with another science show on ABC Radio National, where we like to be different all the time. I now want you to watch a movie about Asperger's with Stephen Ramsay. He's called it Oops, Wrong Planet, for reasons that will soon be quite clear.
It's a personality profile, isn't it?
No, it's not a personality profile. It's a checklist to see if you've got Asperger's syndrome. Are you an Aspie? That's what it says there.
Okay.
It says Steven Spielberg has this condition called Asperger's syndrome. Not only that, but a whole lot of famous people like Einstein have as well. Now, how could they be successful like that if they've got a disabling condition like a mild form of autism? So then I find this little questionnaire that says, are you an Aspie?
Let's go through the list and see if we think that you fit the profile.
I find social situations confusing. I find it hard to make small talk. I turn conversation back on myself. I pick up details really well. I can't work out what other people are thinking easily. I focus really well. I'm rude very often, tactless. And I have really strong interests. And I do things in an inflexible way. I have trouble making friends. All of those things are describing me, but I'm not disabled. So what's going on here?
But I do think that you've got eccentricities. I mean, you think you're completely normal, but your family, your children think you're a complete weirdo. Dad's a weirdo.
The concept of Asperger's syndrome started in the 1940s with an Austrian psychologist called Hans Asperger. He'd identified a group of high-functioning autistic children who would obsess about a single narrow interest like trains. He called them little professors, but they were so bad at communicating that they often ended up in institutions.
Asperger's syndrome has always been of value. The autism gene is useful.
The more I read about
Each time
Asperger's,
you
the more worried I got. The only consoling factor was that if I have it, I might be in the company of genius.
When you appreciate the art of Van Gogh and Mozart, be grateful to Asperger syndrome, because that's why they were such good artists and composers. Thank you.
I discovered that autism is now called the autism spectrum, and this spectrum includes Asperger's syndrome. I'm willing to admit I do have eccentricities, but I don't feel disabled. Is it just another plot by the pharmaceutical companies? Are these people being conned?
Where are you going?
Well, I'm going to go to Ireland and America. I want to meet some other people who might help me understand whether there's a genius link, what it's like to have Asperger's syndrome, can they get over it, is it a problem for their lives, am I like them? I want to find out exactly where I fit in this whole scheme of things. I mean, it's a bit of a shock. It's a real shock, actually, to your system to find out that you've got Asperger's syndrome. Because if you do have it, there's a lot of indications that you can't do anything about it, and it's really stuffing up your life.
Do you think your life's been stuffed up?
Well, that's the thing. People don't tell you if you're a weirdo. People don't tell you they're too polite. Most people are very polite and don't give you feedback. So I've gone through my whole life being not just eccentric, but impossibly eccentric.
What about your family? Have they ever told you?
No, my family are impossibly eccentric as well.
Flying high above the crowds, banners are announcing the centenary of Samuel Beckett. And that same day in Dublin, a book was being launched diagnosing Beckett with Asperger's syndrome, along with 8 other Irish geniuses. The book was co-written by Michael Fitzgerald, Professor of Psychiatry at Trinity College, Dublin.
Writing the book was great pleasure, and the gentleman on our left here is Stephen Ramsay from Australia, who's making a film on autism and Asperger's syndrome, and I'm pleased that he was able to come for the launch.
Fitzgerald's now written 3 books about the great geniuses of history, and he thinks many of them owe their gifts to Asperger's syndrome.
How do we know enough about these traits in dead people to be able to make the kinds of diagnoses that you make in your books?
Yes. Well, the reason we do it, number one, is there's massive information on the people that I have diagnosed. I mean, Hans Christian Andersen was the most famous writer in Europe at the time. So everybody was writing about Hans Christian Andersen. Everybody was leaving descriptions about Hans. So you have a massive amount of information about him. One of their great strengths is their capacity throughout their life to see things from the eyes of a child. And that's why they're particularly good at writing fairy stories.
He's
Einstein
telling me the
said,
stories are clues to Hans Andersen's life, and I'm wondering if they might be clues to mine.
But in a way, the ugly duckling is an outsider. And of course, Hans Christian Andersen himself was an outsider. And the ugly duckling, of course, does represent Hans Christian Andersen. But he's showing that terrible sensations that people with Asperger's syndrome have of being bullied, being pushed out. He was the autistic duck.
Fitzgerald is saying that each story describes a different aspect of Asperger's. The steadfast tin soldier, the little mermaid, the emperor's new clothes, the snow queen. But before I looked closely at the stories, I wanted to visit 5-year-old David Twamley, who had just been diagnosed with Asperger's.
What are you drawing, Davy? Mr. Krabs.
You don't think necessarily that there's something wrong. And for us, it was just like, oh, we've had a son and a daughter, they're like chalk and cheese. And people would say, yes, boys and girls are like chalk and cheese.
Here's. You can see Mr. Men.
Well, you show me.
Oh, wait, I can see Mr. Men. You can see Mr. Men. Mr. Happy. Oh, it's alone.
What's it like at school for him?
He's fine academically,
You're a
but it's just
kangaroo.
all
In
the
my
people
house,
around
I
him.
find
So
a
the yard time would be the worst. When things are difficult, then he'd hit out or kick out at people. So that's like it's not personal. You know, it could be me, it could be his teacher, it could be anybody.
We'll watch it after dinner, okay?
Yes, I'm watching it.
If you do that, you'll break the telly and you'll never be able to see it. But you can't eat in here.
Yes.
No.
Yes, I'm going to watch it.
We'll watch it afterwards, okay? As a reward.
I suppose the first thing I'd like to ask you is just to tell me what your general concerns are, what thoughts you have had about David that led you to bring him to see me.
Paper.
Oh, you want paper? Oh, yes, we need a pencil then as well. Oh, sorry, I'll give you some paper.
His eye contact is considered not typical.
Yes.
So sometimes if he's interested in something,
Yes.
you get very
Focused.
eye contact.
Hyper-focused.
Yes, even like
Hyper-focused,
glued.
yes. Glued to it,
yeah.
hyper-focused, yes.
So really the focus and attention revolves around his areas of interest.
Mm-hmm. Did he do jigsaws upside down without looking at the pattern quickly?
He did. I got the nickname Professor at that because
Yeah,
he was
who
just
called him the
focused.
professor?
The teachers.
Yes, the little professor. Yes.
We have a book which is it's like an encyclopedia on elephants alone. He could tell you the Latin for the various stages of elephant in evolution.
So he doesn't understand the rules of games,
Yes.
like in the
Social
schoolyard.
game, yeah. Be in the schoolyard, would he be on the edge of the group,
He'd
by the wall? Or
sit on a bench or a step.
on his own, in a world of his own, sitting alone, apart from the rest. Yeah. Is he very controlling and dominating?
Yeah, he's quite...
I mean, have things to be done his way. You know, problems in turn
dictatorial.
Dictatorial, yeah. They're very controlling, very dominating. They often speak in a high-pitched tone of voice, like Hans Christian Andersen, and they have very narrow focuses on things that interest them. And they also have tremendous capacity for persistence. And this is absolutely key to their creativity, their persistence and their workaholism.
What's happening now sort of happens every day of the summer holidays. He'll sit and they draw for hours, you know.
He does it before breakfast.
I sort of kept the last few days to give you an idea of the quantity of paper we go through.
David unsettled me. He reminded me so much of myself as a child, an outsider, unable to read all the little rules of the group. His only friend, his sister. Andersen's hero, the steadfast tin soldier, has Asperger traits. He's an outsider. He's got communication problems with the other toys. He's relentlessly persevering. And all this causes tragedy.
Well, in the steadfast tin soldier, obviously, he has one leg, and he also can speak, and most of all the other tin soldiers and toys in the nursery can speak. And so one day he's thrown out the window. And is eaten by a fish. The fish is caught and lo and behold brought back to the same house with the other tin soldiers. Unfortunately, he's blown off into the fire. The other person who melts with him is the paper ballerina, and they both die together.
Like Hans Christian Andersen, the tin soldier's disability undermines any chance of a relationship.
That's my telescope I saved up for a few years ago.
Were you bullied at school because of your interest in these things?
Well, I was in primary school quite a bit. But I just couldn't stop talking about astronomy. I was so interested in it, and I wanted everybody else to be interested in it as well.
What did they call you?
Star boy, star kid, space cadet, little professor. I was 26, 27, I'd never had a girlfriend, never dated or anything. So I just see people moving in their relationship and friendship so easily. And I didn't understand how they did that at all. On one hand, I was offered a PhD. I was really, really intelligent. But on the other side, I felt like I had the social intelligence of a child. So rather than sitting in my office or sitting at home and thinking and reading about Asperger's, I decided to do something practical about it and used my interest by setting up a group for people. So this was the first group in Ireland and probably the first one in the world that was set up by people with Asperger's for people with Asperger's.
I was diagnosed in 1996 when I was about 18. Up until then it was a huge weight on my shoulders until I found out what it was, and now thanks to David.
Before I found out I had Asperger syndrome, I was getting these like obsessive compulsive behaviours and all that.
If you had a conversation between two people, you let one person talk for a bit, then you let them, they let you speak, and so on. That was one skill which we learned. What was the other one, David?
Recognising their emotions.
Yeah.
Ask them how they are feeling.
Yeah, and
not obsessing about yourself and telling them what you're doing, what you're interested in. Trying to make them feel important, that sort of thing.
And one good point is you have to pay eye contact.
And that's the typical Aspie habit, it's talking at people, not listening, lecturing them.
You're supposed to talk to people, not
to people,
not at them. Yeah.
And I didn't know I was talking at people.
I actually used to have a habit where if my mum was talking to a friend of hers up in our sitting room or whatever, I'd come in at the most inappropriate times, and interrupt their conversation. The same thing if she was on the phone like that, I would come in again at the most inappropriate times. And I do have the awareness now to realise that, hang on a minute, you got to give her a bit of space.
I love talking about the Beatles all the time. I'm a big fan, the biggest fan in Ireland. Me and Nigel are. I always keep my hair in the mop top with the John Lennon image, because my hair grows very fast. I'm going to get John Lennon. I said to the girl, I want my hair like this. Like I wanted like John Lennon's hair, the 1964 image.
If you meet one person and talk to them about the Beatles, and then another person the next day talk about the Beatles, that's grand. Yeah. But you keep meeting the same person over and over again each day, you're going to be talking about the Beatles all the time.
Yeah. Who had the Rickenbacker 12-string?
George Harrison had. And John Lennon had 3 Rickenbacker guitars.
Yeah, because he had... You sure?
Yeah, the one he had in Hamburg, he got a spray painted in black.
That was the one that was spray painted in black and white, that was.
Oh yes, wait a minute, Mr. Postman.
Wait, Mr. Postman. Mr. Postman, look and see if there's a letter in your bag for me. I've been waiting for such a long time since I had come to care of mine. There must be just a word today from my girlfriend so far away.
This is Oops, Wrong Planet, in which Steve Ramsay goes to find his true Asperger's identity.
Do we need a medical label to put on genius? Why can't we just accept the fact that they're eccentric or absent-minded or something like that? Why do we have to always go around saying, oh, somebody got some genetics?
I liked Nigel and Carl and David a lot.
Different.
Yeah.
And I felt they were kindred spirits. But being with them makes me more aware of my own Asperger traits. I also talk at people and interrupt conversations. I always thought these were harmless quirks.
And thereby eradicated from the gene pool.
But look at me. I can't stop talking.
All our geeks that make computers work, and I'm worried about the whole issue.
People Asperger's in a certain way haven't grown up. They're trying to hold on to their childhood, or maybe adulthood is too overwhelming with their responsibility and need for more sophisticated social skills.
We'd still be chatting in the cave if we all had good social skills. People who don't have Asperger syndrome, they can turn a blind eye, but the person with Asperger syndrome has no choice but to tell the truth. And of course that's what the little boy did in the Emperor's new clothes.
And The Emperor's New Clothes is Hans Christian Andersen's most celebrated story.
Then the king decided that he would go on a procession and show all his people the wonderful garments that he had. And everyone said they were brilliant. And then finally one little boy said, but he has no clothes. And everybody had to see what they were closing their eyes about. You can see the little boy in the Emperor's New Clothes as the first kind of whistleblower in fairy tales. Because quite a few whistleblowers, I believe, have Asperger's syndrome or high-functioning autism. One of the key things, obviously, is that they have the immaturity, they see the world through the eyes of the child, and they also see the world in black and white.
One of the things I find very funny about Aspies is that when there's a red light for pedestrians, they'll never cross the road, even if there's no traffic. So when they're whistleblowing, they're actually doing what is, by the rule book, probably the right thing to do, but socially is the very wrong thing to do. You know, most people would be worried about repercussions, where this is the rules, you're supposed to do this.
But sometimes organisations don't like that, and they don't like somebody who blows the whistle on what they're doing. And the person with Asperger's is then very upset that they're the one who have upheld the codes of conduct, the law, etc., and the organisation then despises them and makes life difficult for them.
Unit 13, measurement. Click on Go to see this unit.
Hayes is not an Aspie. He has classic autism.
Click on the word.
But his mother, Deborah Locke, is an Aspie. She's also a retired Sydney cop and a police whistleblower.
She's written a book about her time in the force. She started questioning a lot of the corrupt practices in the police force, including the number one rule in the cops in the old days, don't dob in your mate. She's on the line. Hi, Deborah.
Hello, how you going?
Not bad. Well, what was the corrupt climate like when you were in the force?
Oh, I was scared at times, and I'd never been scared of a crook, but there were some cops that I came across that really frightened me.
Yeah. What are you doing now? You're out of the force.
Yes, at the moment, I'm a member of Whistleblowers Australia, and I do support police and other members of the public when they have whistleblowing issues. It's very rare for women. My mother was like it. It's genetic too. Like my grandfather had it, my brother. Both my brother and I had very autistic sons. The girls are fine, but it's the boys. Eat your breakfast.
No!
Yes. Not eating this food. No, do you lock the bed door? Yeah. Now finish.
What?
This is a typical whistleblower's situation. You sort of have the Aladdin's cave, you have all your documents in there, and have a look. And it's like you keep everything filed and numbered and checked, and you just don't miss anything, because you never know when someone's going to attack your credibility or say, well, what happened this day, or what did you do then? And so it starts to pile up and pile up and pile up. And over the years it progresses to where you have to have a room full of them. So, oh well, today's a great day. I'm looking forward to it.
Debbie is about to receive Australia's first award for whistleblowing.
It's like I've been validated that everything I said and was true. They spent a lot of years saying that I was imagining it, it's not true, the culture's really good, there's no corrupt police.
Especially at the time.
At the time, they just were vicious and attacking me, and so it's quite bizarre that now they're awarding me.
Yeah, I thought you're pointing to that, yeah.
No. Did I say parking?
Continuing in, not straight down there.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yep, when I start seeing those blue uniforms, the post-traumatic stress starts popping up. Well, now I'm feeling ill. I'm feeling a bit nervous, and I'm sure there's going to be people here that hate my guts.
Recipient of the Commissioner's Certificate of Merit, former Detective Senior Constable Deborah Locke. Her subsequent efforts to report police corruption and mismanagement were instrumental in moves to establish the New South Wales Police Royal Commission. Former Detective Senior Constable Deborah Locke.
Salute, I don't know. It's a great day for the police force, and just to acknowledge whistleblowing publicly, it means a lot. It's just not for myself, but for all the young police here and everyone.
Like members of any group, cops are mostly team players. They value loyalty and comradeship, and they obey the unspoken rules, like you don't snitch on a mate. Debbie ignored these rules. She always went by the book.
You stand for courage, honour, justice, fairness and truth.
And usually at school, when teachers on the blackboard, somebody's naughty. OK, come on, own up. Who did that? Code of silence. But the kid with Asperger said, he did. And the other kids say, shh, shh, you don't say that. But he did, and you told him to do it.
On sale at the bookstore, there was a video Professor Tony Atwood had made diagnosing Brett, an 11-year-old American boy.
Now, next to you is your mum. Now, your mum is called Karen. Now, I don't know much about your mum. In fact, I know very little. You're going to tell me what sort of a person she is.
She's a female.
Oh, OK. And are you sure she's a female?
Yeah, she's a lady.
How do you know she's a lady?
Because of the hair.
Oh, does that mean that everyone with long hair is a lady?
Yeah, but even a lady who's a lady has one of those big you-know-whats and have to wear you-know-what.
But you don't have to wear a you-know-what.
No offense, Mom.
None taken, sweetie.
The police officers use kids as hall monitors at school again. I could be hall monitor and get the kids in trouble if they're wearing too short pants. See?
Oh, okay. So they've got to be the right length?
Yep, the right length.
What happens if your shorts aren't the right length?
You get in trouble. Yeah, I just don't understand why some people just don't get what I care about.
Are there any other Asperger kids in your school?
Well, I'm not sure. I think I'm the only one there. Sometimes I just feel like I'm an extinct child.
Extinct?
Yeah, the only one who has diabetes and Asperger syndrome.
Yeah, do other kids bully you?
Well, only Daniel, Cameron, and Justin Did I say Justin?
Yeah.
Okay, Mom, I'm tired of being a one-of-a-kind freak.
Brett won't go out in the front yard and shoot baskets. We can't play catch with the baseball. We can't throw a frisbee. Just the typical daily events that you do with your children. It's very difficult. Yeah.
So what was the first indication that Brett was going to be a unique boy?
Oh, I would say he was probably 3 years old, and he was still trying to verbalize and learn how to speak, and I would ask him a question, and he would respond with the question. And at that point, it really hit home that we had a child with a special problem.
He'd respond with the same question.
Yeah,
not just another question, but the same exact question.
Brett, what would you like for dinner tonight? What would I like for dinner tonight would be his response.
He talked at a typical age, but it was a lot of echolalia, the repeating back.
Even now at 13, you would ask him a question, and he would answer with a statement or a phrase from a video.
Shut up, toe brain.
Be nice.
Listen up, you guild geeks. I want this equipment out of here, and I want them out now. Comprende?
You see how he takes a whole phrase from a cartoon, and yet he changes it. Okay?
I was going to hurt your heart. Yeah, Nazi.
Oh, that would be a sad thing.
Yeah, and I'm going to stomp you and murderize you and bulverate you.
What show is that from?
Which video is that from?
Don't wise mouth me, bug breath.
Is that a video or a computer game?
That's a video.
That
or
is
Cartoon Network.
That's Muppets.
Next time you speak one more word that will insult me, you just stand still so I can pound you. I said get lost.
Like many autistic or Asperger kids, as he grew up, Brett started thinking not with words, but with pictures. Thinking in Pictures is the title of the first ever memoir of someone diagnosed with autism, Professor Temple Grandin. So I'm paying her a visit in the cattle country of Colorado. Temple pioneered humane methods for handling livestock, and she's designed over half the cattle handling facilities in America.
I thought everybody could do virtual 3D reality in their head. I didn't know that my thinking was different. When I was a young kid, I didn't know that other people didn't think in pictures. I thought everybody thought in pictures. I'm able to think in full motion video.
So you can create a virtual version of a machine running in your head?
That's correct, yes. And I've also read that Tesla, who also probably was autistic, who invented the power plant, would test his turbines by running them in his head. Well, the thing is, Asperger's is a big continuum. There's a tremendous amount of variation. Not every child that has Asperger's is going to be a genius, but there is a subset in there that can be a genius. And there's others that may get kind of, an ordinary kind of job. I find a lot of people that I'm friends with, other designers and engineers, I think they're a little bit on the spectrum.
But I went to this Asperger picnic and people didn't worry so much about making eye contact or interrupting each other.
Well, you see, in a technical kind of field, I don't think people get so hung up on eye contact because in order to sell jobs, I made a portfolio that sell my work, not myself. And as long as I didn't just do overtly rude stuff, then, I was fine. And I was taught when I was young not to just go up and tell people off or tell them that their hair looks stupid or something like that, that was rude.
I've actually gotten much less rude a person because of this film. I think I've become so aware of the thought of things I do to others that actually annoy other people, and I stopped doing a lot of them.
Well, but you see, but that's just learning. You see, and the thing is, the more you learn, you just keep learning and learning and learning and learning. I cannot think. If I don't have a photorealistic picture in my head, I cannot think.
Temple thinks in pictures because she has trouble forming concepts. In fact, until she was 12, she couldn't tell the difference between a cat and a dog.
Because if I ask you, think about a church steeple, most people just get sort of a vague generalized one. I only see specific ones. But I think what's happening is I think I've got like privileged access right to the primary hard drive. Alan Snyder, a scientist down in Australia, said to me, most people just get the file folders. You get the contents of the file.
The scientist Temple had mentioned was Alan Snyder, who works at Sydney University in my hometown.
Welcome to the Centre for the Mind.
Okay, thank you.
Please come in.
Maybe savant-like extraordinary skills are due to brain damage, are due to brain impairment. Nadia is this extraordinary 3-year-old girl that was discovered in England a number of years ago in a child's school drawing contest across England or something like that, and they discovered this girl who could spontaneously draw, never went through a scribbling stage, just drew like Leonardo da Vinci in one step. She never learned how to draw. She couldn't recognize her mother from the nurse. She was extremely retarded, couldn't speak, and look, she could draw like that.
Alan Snyder says someone with autism or Asperger syndrome may have brain damage that's affecting their left temporal lobe. According to Snyder, for a short time, this subject's brain won't easily be forming concepts. There'll be less of a barrier to the information streaming in from the outside world. He's invented a machine that uses magnetic stimulation to partially turn off the left temporal lobe.
We're inhibiting that part of the brain. The left anterior temporal lobe is basically, it's higher order. It decides what raw data gets into consciousness, and it imposes concepts on the raw data, so you never actually get the raw data into consciousness. If we totally demodulate, well, in a sense we are demodularising it so that more raw data just comes into consciousness, so when you see more of the raw data, there's less filtering.
Thank you.
To test this theory, the subject here will guess the number of dots on the screen before and after his left temporal lobe has been inhibited, to see if there's any improvement in his ability to take in information.
50. 70.
After 15 minutes of magnetic stimulation, this subject's guessing skills increased by 3 times. And this supports Snyder's theory that the left temporal lobe is the key to understanding autism and Asperger's.
In a sense, the classical idealized autism is the state of not being prejudiced. It's a state of not having preconceptions. So a whistleblower, who in one sense is someone I respect, I mean, in situations, I mean, they save lives. In other situations, they lost the big picture. I guess that could be an autistic trait, concentrating on the bark of the tree and not seeing the forest.
Have you done it, Jason?
Yeah. Have I had it?
Yes.
Yeah.
What happened for you?
I thought it was great because I got a large effect. I was markedly changed, and when I was just looking around at detail, I noticed things more than I would have normally, and also the experiment involves sound, and I noticed some of the stimuli differently.
Is there other work that shows the same kind of inhibition of the left temporal lobe? Brain damage from car accidents and things like that?
There was a case of a boy who was hit in the head with a baseball right around the frontal temporal lobe, or the anterior temporal lobe, and he became a savant calendar calculator. There are other cases of people being injured and becoming a mathematical calculator.
And there's been some research by a doctor named Bruce Miller. And what Bruce Miller has found is that in certain type of Alzheimer's patient, where they get frontal temporal lobe dementia, art and music ability comes out of a person that has no previous interest in art or music. And as the language areas of the brain get wrecked, this will come out, the art and music talent will come out for 4 or 5 years, and then the Alzheimer's destroys the whole entire brain.
So Temple's brain seems to work in exactly the same way as Alan Snyder back in Sydney said it would. But if she can't form concepts, how can she think at all?
One of the problems you have with people on the autism Asperger spectrum is they have difficulty forming new categories, forming new file folders. This is one of the reasons why you get the black and white thinking. It's like 2 big file folders.
Black and white?
Yeah, they're not able to make file folders for different shades of gray.
If somebody came to me and they wanted to win the Nobel Prize in mathematics, I would ask them, have you got Asperger syndrome or high-functioning autism? If the answer to that was yes, then I would say, I think that's reasonable for you now to have a try. It's not easy to get the Nobel Prize, and I can't guarantee you'd get it. But at least you're in with a shout. If they said, no, I'm a very sociable person, I get on well with everybody, I get A's in school, the teachers say I'm wonderful, I'm the head boy in school, I would say your chances with that very rounded, balanced, average personality, your chances of getting the Nobel Prize are very slim.
Along with Francis Crick, James Watson won the Nobel Prize for discovering the structure of DNA. Decades later, he kick-started the Human Genome Project. But now, Watson's discovered that late in life, he's the father of an autistic son.
We have a son with severe disabilities. He's very, very intelligent, but he can't take care of himself. So he didn't speak till he was 4, very late, which, we thought didn't mean anything, but it did mean something, and doesn't like to shake hands or be hugged. At times I think, we're almost broken.
Watson is so affected by his son's autism that he wants to genetically engineer future generations and find a prenatal test so that pregnant women can abort fetuses with autism genes. But some people in the autism community are worried that there's a kind of autism or Asperger genocide in the making. That if we get rid of people with these genes, we won't have any geeks or specialists to solve the world's problems. Because there's growing evidence that autism genes are the same genes as Asperger genes and geek genes.
These are all survival genes you're talking about eliminating from a Darwinian perspective.
This is Silicon Valley, the centre of geekdom, just down the road from San Francisco. I'm here to meet Steve Silberman, an editor from Wired magazine. I'd seen an article he'd written about an autism epidemic in Silicon Valley.
People who would not be necessarily diagnosed with autism or even Asperger syndrome, but people who have autistic traits but are considered more or less normal. It's possible that they might have a profoundly autistic kid at a higher rate than the general population. I was on a trip for Wired magazine with a man who invented one of the most widely used programming languages in the world. And after the trip, I asked him if I could do a follow-up at his house. And he said, sure, you should know we have a profoundly autistic daughter. A couple of months later, I did an article on a completely different person who was also from a family who had helped build the internet. And she said, well, yes, we have a profoundly autistic daughter. And I said, that's interesting. That's the second time I've heard that. So I said, do you know a lot of parents in Silicon Valley who have autistic kids? I said, oh, yes, there's an epidemic. There's something very unusual happening in Silicon Valley. And I spent quite a bit of time going down to Silicon Valley, talking with clinicians, talking with parents, meeting kids, and it appeared that there was something unusual happening in Silicon Valley. And I spoke with someone who trains software debuggers at Microsoft. And he said, quote, "All of my best debuggers have Asperger syndrome." And I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "What they tell me, they can hold hundreds of lines of code in their head, and they look for a break in the symmetry of the image, and that's where the bug is." And what's so interesting about that is that it suggests, along with a lot of other evidence, that people with Asperger's syndrome think differently.
And you're listening to The Science Show on ABC Radio National with me, Robyn Williams, and Oops, Wrong Planet, a film by Stephen Ramsay.
But gigs aren't just in IT. We're all over the place. We're in universities and libraries and laboratories.
Everyone's got the power in there. Great corporate.
And anywhere specialist fixations flourish, such as birdwatching or plane spotting.
How long have you been doing it?
About 25 years.
Really?
Yeah.
You're a plane spotter as well?
Yeah.
So how long did you spend here, and how many hours a week would you spend?
In a week, I would say 6 hours on Saturday, 6 hours on Sunday, and maybe a few hours during the week. 3 or 4 hours during the week.
Right.
This is the best airport in the Britain for spotting.
What do you do for a living? What is your work?
I work at a tax office.
Tax office?
Yeah.
Really?
I'm a taxman, yeah.
I'm in insurance.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
In Silberman's article was a do-it-yourself test designed by Cambridge professor Simon Baron-Cohen. When I did the test, I was shocked to see how well I fitted the profile. And not only that, Baron-Cohen had some hard science to back up what Silberman was saying.
Are you aware of the article that was in Wired magazine about 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of thoughts on that?
What we've found is that when you take parents of children with autism, you find that both parents are likely to show very rapid attention to detail on psychological tests. They're faster than parents without a child with autism.
If you got 32 out of 50 or more in this test, it was a very good indicator that you might have Asperger's syndrome. Well, I got 36, which would be clearly in the Asperger's part of the test.
Yeah. So, you know, those scores are high. But it may be that there are lots of people out there who score just as high, like yourself, but who've never pursued a diagnosis because they're managing fine. They have a career, a family, they're not depressed. And it's often other reasons that would lead somebody to a clinic.
The fact is, if I can score this high, there might be thousands out there in the workforce close to a diagnosis. But they go unnoticed. And this could be because they're men.
People with autism may simply be an exaggeration or an extreme of the male profile. So the male profile in the general population is where an individual has a strong drive to systemize and less interest in empathy or the world of emotions.
Hans Christian Andersen obviously was a classic Asperger syndrome in absolutely every way. He had huge difficulties with empathy, but particularly with emotional communication. In his story, The Little Mermaid, this mermaid in some way saves a prince from being shipwrecked. Because she can't speak, she can't tell him what she feels, and the Little Mermaid is there cut off, who can't communicate with other human beings. And of course Hans Christian Andersen himself had great difficulties in communication. And once again, he remains in this story a kind of an outsider forever who can't communicate with other human beings because of his autism, because of his Asperger syndrome.
In Hans Andersen's birthplace, there's a museum dedicated to his stories, and school children come in and reenact the Snow Queen. In this story, a boy is kidnapped by the cruel Snow Queen and loses the capacity for empathy. His heart is no longer connected to his mind. But his best friend, Gogh, rescues him and manages to thaw out his frozen heart. For Andersen, it was a kind of wishful thinking that it's somehow possible to revive one's missing empathy. Have you found something else to talk about that engages your interest, not as much, but that helps you sort of get off the addiction to the Beatles?
You mean other interests?
Yes.
Yeah, have you got more than one interest?
That's one of the things.
Yes. You mean I need to broaden my mind out in order to.
No, I just don't. I don't just talk about the Beatles. I can change from different subjects to subjects, different things. Like I could be talking about the Beatles maybe one time, the public transport the next, history the next. That's
Titanic.
Yeah, history.
Well, I often get into the situation where I love talking about my personal interests. I love talking about my personal interests so much.
Some people, Asperger's, are kind of very, very shy, very withdrawn, probably because of bullying or whatever bad experience in life. But not
you
withdrawn.
got bullied? At school?
I did. Well, at some stage we all were. At some stage, yeah.
It got better when I went into about 5th and 6th class. I had a good school teacher. And what he did was very helpful. He put me on a stage play as a space alien, a Christmas play. And that's what the bullies were calling me. They're calling me a space cadet and space alien and all that sort of thing. But there was I was on the play, making people laugh by being myself. So I wasn't ever self-conscious for a long time after that.
While making this film, I've realised that I can act sensitively in some social situations.
So, what's your favourite album?
Oh, them all. I have them all at home. I have them on vinyl. But in fact, I paid £100 for a Rubber Soul on vinyl.
Wow, £100.
But perhaps I'm putting in effort because I'm working.
In the London Beatles store.
Wow, why was it so expensive?
Oh, well, in London you're paying big money.
Right. Must have been in very good condition.
Oh, excellent condition.
Yeah. You were asking me before if I thought you'd changed. I think there are two things that may have helped you over the last 10 or 15 years. One is meditation. You obsess about meditating every single morning, no matter where you are. I think that's probably been good. The other thing is taking the dog walking down the dog park.
I've learned that instead of avoiding everyone or talking exclusively about my dog, I ask about theirs.
No, hi, how are you? G'day.
And suddenly I'm in this jolly conversation.
Is this Hercules?
Yes.
I think I might have seen Hercules before.
Here we go. Oh,
Wow.
that's
Oh.
not... Oh.
Hercules, you're the one that meant to be doing that, aren't you?
Exactly.
Getting a diagnosis is a wake-up call for me. It's made me realise that I'll always have to be vigilant if I want to fit in socially and not be an outsider.
People with Asperger's often like to be in control as well. And you could imagine that filmmaking would be attractive to somebody with Asperger's because ultimately you have it on tape or digital and you can then do the editing and select the detail that you want, and it's almost like organising life according to the filmmaker. It's an interesting notion to consider that autism is a thread that has been running through the fabric of the human population for a long time, and that we may be building a world in which people with some autistic traits are actually better suited to thrive than people who don't have them.
I see that most people have a really spread out intelligence that's kind of got lots and lots of different interests, but none of them is very intense. So they never get good at one thing. Whereas a person with Asperger's, because we've got a very focused mind, you get interested in 1 or 2 or 3 subjects. And therefore, even though our intelligence may be equal to everybody else, because we're all focused in one bit, it's almost like a little laser pointer. It's all being concentrated from one big spread out little area of interest into one little tiny narrow area.
But I do, it's like when he's drawing, you can see him sort of stop and kind of flick through the movie or flick through a book, or it's like he's referring to something like that, and sees it very clearly, and then sits down and draws it with all the little details he remembers.
You are listening to a film by Stephen Ramsay called Oops, Wrong Planet, his quest to examine his own Asperger's. And having known him for many years, I'd never have guessed. And by the way, on In Conversation coming up on Thursday evening, you can hear Carolyn Lightwing, the mother of maths genius Daniel we had on the other week, talking about her son's Asperger's and what it was like to bring him up.
You've been listening to another ABC Radio National podcast. ABC Radio National, on air and online, with many of our programs available as podcasts or MP3 downloads. All the details at abc.net.au/rn/podcast.